Call the roll, Mr. Basser.
Mr. Jewell,
Here.
Mrs. McIntosh,
Here.
Mrs. Miller,
Here.
Mrs. Milligan,
Here.
Mrs. Morris.
Here.
I'd like for everybody to stand to do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this time, I'll turn it over to Dr. Bell for.
Thank you, Mr. Jewell. Tonight for our student and program recognition, we have our Director of Transportation, Jeremy Thies.
Good evening. I'm Jeremy. I'm the transportation supervisor here. Before I was a supervisor here, I was a regular driver for 2 years, and I was the on-bus instructor here for 2 years. And prior to that, I drove for Franklin for a year before I come here at Carlisle. Right now, we have 16 bus routes that go out every day, as well as 2 van routes. We have 4 regular aides, and as of now, I have 2 sub-bus drivers. I'm currently looking to hire 1 more sub-driver. I'm hoping I have an interview Wednesday with a woman who's been driving from Middletown, coming in for an interview, so hopefully I can talk her into coming here. We've been fortunate enough not to have the driver shortage that most area schools are experiencing. I'm sure you guys have heard about Franklin rotating days, and a lot of area schools were going through it this winter, especially with COVID and everything. We have a lot of drivers who've been here for a long time. They're pretty loyal to the district, so we was pretty fortunate this year to stay staffed and to get through all that without having to miss any school. This past year, we transported 1,127 students a day, and we were driving 1,125 miles a day, so almost a mile per student that we were transporting. That's 264 more students than we were transporting last year, and 257 more miles a day than last year, which those numbers are kind of skewed because last year was a COVID year, so some of those kids were already enrolled just coming back from virtual. This summer, we're trading in 4 of our oldest and highest mileage buses for 4 brand new gasoline buses with the help of the grant money that we received. This will help us a lot. We'll save on electricity for not having to plug them in this winter. And gas just being cheaper than diesel will save us quite a bit. And the fuel mileage is only about a mile difference between a gas and a diesel bus, so it's pretty much a wash when it comes to the mileage. We're hoping to have 3 of those buses this August. They're going to start building our first 3 August 3rd, and depending on the supply chain issues, hopefully they'll be done within 2 weeks. So we're hoping to get 3 of them before school starts, and the 4th one probably around October or November. That'll give us 5 gasoline buses, 4 of them new, and the other one gasoline bus we have is only 3 years old, so it's still in great shape. We also just sold our flatbed truck, which was also one of our snowplow trucks. It was in awful shape. So we was lucky to get out of it what we got out of it, and we replaced it with a newer Dodge truck that's going to be used for plowing the lots and running parts and things like that. So big improvement over that flatbed truck. We have a lot of drivers that they do a great job. I just trained a driver. Her name is Tammy Carroll to be our new OBI this upcoming school year. She's been driving for Carlisle for 6 years. She'll be an excellent trainer. She's actually just 1 endorsement away from meeting the requirements to be a state tester and examiner. So with her years of driving a semi and a school bus, I felt she was probably the best person for that role. We started using routing software this year for our buses, and Tammy built almost every route that we had. She put a lot of time in to get the routes together on this software and get everybody's times down and everything. There's a couple other drivers that go above and beyond for us, Brandy Lawson and Chris Oliver. They both take a whole lot of field trips, and they both work over the summer painting and repairing buses to help them get ready for inspections. Chris, throughout the year, he fuels the buses 2 times a week, and he helps our mechanic replace seat foams, and then he repairs on the buses throughout the school year. Every bus passed inspection this past April. They were in great shape, and we have inspections coming up again this August. And I think we only have a few more buses. We've got some painting and some small repairs to do, and we should be good to go for inspections this August too. Our mechanic, Jim Ball, he does a great job of keeping us running and keeping everything in good shape. So other than that, everything's going pretty good in transportation. So we're looking forward to the next school year and the new buses.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to commend Jeremy and the Transportation Department, because, you know, they're the first people that our students see in the morning and the last ones they see in the afternoon, so that really sets the tone for the day. And, you know, we talked about COVID, and I know a lot of districts had issues with not just having drivers, but drivers complaining about being mask mandatory for their majority of the year, and our bus drivers were not like that. Never got anything up in arms about that, just did their job and went about their business. So they're to be commended. They did a great job, and again, tribute to Jeremy and his leadership, and we certainly appreciate all that they do for us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, we'll turn it over to our visitors' comments. Okay, we don't seem to have any. We'll turn it over to Mr. Basser for the treasury report.
Thank you, Mr. Jewell. Do not have any non-action items this month. I'm a little more full with action items this month than most months. June 30 is end of the fiscal year, so our department is real busy right now trying to finish up this fiscal year's budget and be ready on July 1, July 2nd to start spending next year's money on next year's expenses and not have them be intertwined. So first off, I need approval for the minutes for the last regularly scheduled board meeting, which was May 23.
I need a motion.
So moved.
First by Mrs. Milligan,
Second.
second by Mrs. McIntosh. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Milligan,
Yes.
Mrs. McIntosh,
Yes.
Mr. Jewell,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Morris.
Yes.
Next is the financial report, which is part of your packet. I won't elaborate too much on that. I'll talk a little bit more as we get to a later item.
Need a motion.
So moved.
First by Mrs. Miller,
Second.
by Mrs. Morris. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Morris,
Yes.
Mrs. Milligan,
Yes.
Mr. Jewell,
Yes.
Mrs. McIntosh.
Yes.
Next is just a little housekeeping item, approval from you all for us to close the books for the fiscal year of 2021-22.
Need a motion.
So moved.
First by Mrs. Milligan,
Second.
by Mrs. Miller. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Milligan,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Morris,
Yes.
Mr. Jewell,
Yes.
Mrs. McIntosh.
Yes.
Next, I have temporary appropriations, and if you remember, we do temporary appropriations to start the year, which would be the months of July and August, and I'll be bringing then the regular, for the year-long appropriations to the September board meeting. So in order for us to have appropriations in place and for us to start spending money become July 1, I need approval.
I need a motion.
So moved.
First by Mrs. Milligan,
Second.
second by Mrs. McIntosh. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Milligan,
Yes.
Mrs. McIntosh,
Yes.
Mr. Jewell,
Yes.
Mrs. Morris,
Yes.
and Mrs. Miller.
Yes.
And then next, I have approved the supplemental appropriations for this year. I didn't really have to make any changes. I just had one change in appropriation, which was one of the construction accounts, and that was only by about $13,000, and it actually went down rather than up. So no real changes. The way the school year went this year, we're not completely closed out, but as we talked about before when I did the 5-year forecast back in May, we had a really nice bounce back year over the previous year with just so many factors that lined up in our favor, and I don't want to jinx anything because that can happen the other way in a hurry. So I need approval for our appropriations to finish off this school year.
Need a motion.
So moved.
First by Mrs. McIntosh.
Second.
Second by Mrs. Miller. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. McIntosh,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Milligan,
Yes.
Mrs. Morris,
Yes.
and Mr. Jewell.
Yes.
And lastly, on an annual basis, to approve our property, liability, and fleet insurance with our pool of the Southwestern Ohio insurance.
I need a motion.
So moved.
First by Mrs. Morris,
Second.
second by Mrs. Milligan. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Morris?
Yes.
Mrs. Milligan?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller?
Yes.
Mrs. McIntosh?
Yes.
And Mr. Jewell?
Yes.
Thank you very much. That's my report for June.
Now I'll turn it over to Dr. Bell for his superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mr. Jewell. A few non-action items. First of all, we had a meeting with Four Seasons, who does our preventative maintenance agreement, and they've been going through the building, taking care of a lot of things there. We'll be, when we, after Mr. Bassler wraps up his book, we'll see how energy efficient we were and maybe anything that we can do to make that more so, but we're running very well and in a good shape as far as our dollar per square foot. A couple of things we had was, speaking of the building, and I won't take anything away from Jamie Branson or Patrick Flanagan because they're going to be here in August to discuss everything they did this summer. But as you walk through the building, you can certainly see how clean it is and some of the updates and improvements that they've done. And we're looking forward to the finishing touches on that and hearing their report on what happened there. With the building, talking about that, it's a never-ending operational building. We had the alumni dinner, we had the quilt show in here. People can't stop ranting and raving about the building and getting more people into it and showing it off, and we're certainly excited about that. Along with that, graduation, we had our last meeting before graduation. Since then, we had the graduation, went very well, got a lot of great comments about graduation, and I think that as we've moved into the new building, we made the adjustments necessary to make that a wonderful experience for the graduates and the parents. Along with the building, I just wanted to, last Wednesday, Carlisle Schools was presented with the 2022 Industry of the Year Award from the Chamber 45005, which was the original Franklin Area Chamber of Commerce. Last year they got the President's Award. This year is the Industry of the Year Award. I'll read what it says. When Carlisle local schools asked its voter to invest in new facilities, the district was asking for an investment in Carlisle's future. The district's new K-12 campus is not only a beautiful addition to the community that offers an enhanced educational environment to Carlisle students, it has also become a catalyst for the city of Carlisle's continued growth and revitalization. Carlisle Local Schools vision has contributed to the vibrancy and quality of life. Ms. McIntosh, Mrs. Miller, and Mrs. Milligan joined Mr. Bassler and I at the breakfast, and I was able to accept the award on your behalf, but as I said there, the award certainly precedes me. Many people did a lot of work prior to me coming on board. I just happened to be the one up there that got to make a little speech and accept the award, but I want to thank everyone in the community, the board. Mr. Bassler is making sure that our financial arena of that area was being taken care of, and make sure we were being fiscally responsible, and I think they did a great job leading that charge as we went through the process and as we wrap up. So that's basically all that we had for, the one other thing was free lunch. You probably may be hearing a lot about that. Free lunch for students the last couple of years. Last we heard was they were just going to continue free lunch through the summer. They were looking for next year, but that hasn't been decided yet. What they were talking about was maybe those students that are on reduced lunch would also be free. Not sure how much that would benefit us, but we are optimistic and guardedly so that maybe they'll just continue to do with free lunch for everyone for years to come, at least for next year, and we'll see how that goes. So those are all my non-action items this time. Thank you. Okay, rolling into the action items. If I get a approval for action items 1, general district business, we've got to approve the Carlisle High School 2023 school handbook. Item B, the Carlisle Junior High student handbook, and the Carlisle Elementary, which is grades K through 6 student handbook. D is to approve the food service director salary schedule. That's to bring the salary schedule of the food service director up to the same criteria as the other salary schedules as far as years experience, and we want to make those all consistent. And then E is to approve the memorandum of understanding with Carlisle Teachers Association to continue the gifted supplemental position that we started last year. It's not a position in the CTA at this point, maybe negotiations, who knows what that'll happen with that, but we need to get that MOU on that so we could continue that with that program being housed in the building. So if I get you to approve those action items.
Anybody got any questions? I need a motion.
So moved.
First by Mrs. Milligan,
I'll second.
second by Mrs. Miller. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Milligan?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller?
Yes.
Mrs. McIntosh,
Yes.
Mr. Jewell,
Yes.
Mrs. Morris.
Yes.
Thank you. Item 2, certified employment. First, approve Brian Wolf for summer school tutor for Algebra 1. Item B, approve Katie Peppelmeyer as LPDC chairperson for next school year. I want to thank Misty Talaferro for the job that she's done in the past years for that. That's a pretty tiresome task, keeping track of all those teachers. It's like herding cats. So, and then item C, approve Randy Osborne for summer school teacher, June 6th to June 24th, retroactively. And that'd be item 2, please.
I need a motion.
So moved.
First by Mrs. Miller, second by Mrs. McIntosh. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. McIntosh,
Yes.
Mrs. Milligan,
Yes.
Mrs. Morris,
Yes.
Mr. Jewell.
Yes.
Thank you. Item 3 is classified resignations. Approve the resignation of Stephanie Hodge as food service secretary.
Need a motion.
So moved.
First by Mrs. Morris,
Second.
second by Mrs. Milligan. Call the roll, please.
Was that second by Mrs. Milligan?
Yes.
Gotcha. Mrs. Morris,
Yes.
Mrs. Milligan,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. McIntosh,
Yes.
Mr. Jewell.
Yes.
Thank you. For item 4, classified employment, A, approve Alex Couch for summer help and maintenance department. B, approve Leslie Leach as an educational classroom aide. C, approve Kaylee Cisco as a bus driver. D, approve Bonnie Evans as bus driver. E, approve Tracy Foster as bus driver substitute. F, approve Jonathan Ricketts for summer grounds employment. G, approve Stephanie Hodge as food service secretary for the 2022-2023 school year for training purposes not to exceed 25 days to help train her replacement. And item H, approve Nikki Weissong as preschool aide.
I need a motion.
So moved.
First by Mrs. McIntosh,
Second.
second by Mrs. Milligan. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. McIntosh,
Yes.
Mrs. Milligan,
Yes.
Mr. Jewell,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Morris.
Yes.
Okay, before we go on to supplemental employment, we'll need a motion to remove items F, G, and Q from the supplemental employment. So if we get, I'll simply make that the agenda item to remove items F, G, and Q from supplemental employment. So if we could approve that prior to voting on that. I guess we need to get a motion, approve the motion and approve that. So go ahead, just need to.
I need a motion.
So moved.
First by Mrs. Morris,
Second.
second by Mrs. Miller. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Morris,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Milligan,
Yes.
Mrs. McIntosh,
Yes.
and Mr. Jewell.
Yes.
And that came as a request from Mr. Augustine, the athletic director today.
Okay.
The head wrestling coach informed him today that he's not going to be able to do it because of work and being too busy. So in order to get an opportunity to relook at that, we just went ahead and backed off all the wrestling coaches at this time.
Okay.
Still could end up being that way, but based on the news he got today, he had to back those off the agenda. So that was just a couple hours ago, and we couldn't change anything, so we decided to just remove them by vote and then vote on the remaining ones.
Makes sense.
So if that helps explain what we just did there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So item 5 then, supplemental employment, A through E and H through P for those supplemental employment positions.
I need a motion.
So moved.
First by Mrs. McIntosh,
Second.
second by Mrs. Milligan. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. McIntosh,
Yes.
Mrs. Milligan,
Yes.
Mrs. Morris,
Yes.
Mr. Jewell,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller.
Yes.
Thank you very much, and that's all I have for my action report.
Okay, for the Board of Education, Molly, we got anything going?
There's things out there, but we're getting ready to move into lame duck, and they're not expecting anything to progress educationally.
They went lame duck before
Lame duck before that, but we're lame duck right now.
Okay, anything going on in CTC we need to? Okay, any old business? I see on the new businesses, we're changing July board meeting to Thursday, July the 21st.
Yes.
Yep, due to vacation schedules, we
Yeah.
need to change the July board meeting. It'll now be on Thursday, July 21st, for our
Sounds-
regular board meeting in July.
Thank you.
Okay. And now we need to go into executive for a purpose of personnel with no action to follow. I need a motion.
So moved.
First by Mrs. Milligan,
Second.
second by Mrs. Morris. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Milligan?
Yep.
Mrs. Morris?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller?
Yes.
Mrs. McIntosh?
Yes.
And Mr. Jewell?
Yes.
Time to executive session is 6:21.